Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Sko Show on Mile High Sports. My name's Sean Jotar. That is Matt Smith, Real Matt Smith on social media, the host of his own Buffaloes podcast. And we're so delighted to have an opportunity to break down this week's game with him. Matt, thanks for joining us. What I want to start with before we go anywhere is Coach Prime's health. And when we talk about the situation with the blood clots he felt after the last loss, that maybe they had returned, he underwent a procedure this week, was basically immediately back at practice, expected to be back, obviously, back to normal. That part is obviously good because health is first and foremost for everybody. And for Coach Prime, it obviously makes the most difference for him as well. But I thought the way he handled it, in pointing out to people that I appreciate all the well wishes and all that sort of stuff, the idea that what we're really looking at is something that is genetic. It doesn't have to do with me overworking myself or anything like that. And I have a good take care team when we're handling it. And then get the proof positive of we had an appointment this week. We handled something this week with the procedure, and I'm going to be good to coach on Saturday. I thought that was a subtly wise way of handling this because obviously there's always a lot of attention spent talking about Coach Prime all the way across the college football landscape. But in this case, it seemed to have a bit of a dual meaning. And I thought it was a very, very canny move on his part.
Yeah, I think it was multi-pronged in the approach, right? One of it was that he doesn't like talking about himself, especially this stuff. And I think the more he can move on from it and doesn't have to think about it, I think that's number one. Because, look, this was his 16th surgery since 2021. For
Right.
any human being, that is an insane mental toll, physical toll. I mean, you name it. I mean, having one surgery, you put me out for 2 weeks after that, and the man's back in practice the next day. But yeah, the other part of this is that if your plans are to stay here long term, one thing you cannot have everybody out there thinking is that you've got serious health issues that may prevent you from being able to do that job in the future. And the other part of this, and it's something that I brought up on my show with Brian Howell, is that look, outside of being a neurosurgeon, being a D1 head football coach is about as tough of a job as I've come across in my, 32 years of life experience. The amount of effort, the amount of stress that comes with it, the amount of time that you have to dedicate to doing that job correctly and doing it the right way. And a lot of these guys take it too far and they sleep at their office every single night and they don't see their families until after the year, and it's very time consuming because you are responsible ultimately for everything in your program. And so I think it was really important that he came out and from his perspective told everybody, look, I got this. It's not because the job's too hard. It's not because I'm pushing myself too much, as you said. It's because this is just something that I'm dealing with. And getting back to practice the day after and showing that it wasn't a big deal, that was important for him as well. But yes, I see where you're coming from, because we all know that in recruiting, it's a
Yeah.
no holds barred game, and
Mhm.
everybody's going to look for every single angle. And if you're competing with Colorado for a player, you can easily say, well, you sure Coach Prime is going to be there by the time you're a sophomore? So I agree, but also from a human perspective, just being around him, as much as I have the last couple of years, it's tough to watch somebody have to go through that time after time after time.
Yeah, and the point that you made there, I think, is where I was trying to kind of go. The idea that it is a cutthroat business recruiting, and you are exactly right. There are plenty of folks that if you're competing for the same one, they are going to ask that question. You're like, well, do you really know about his health? Is he really going to be there? Can he really help you? Is that a little bit below the belt? Yeah, it probably is, but at the same time, it's what happens. And so getting out ahead of it and basically saying it doesn't have to do with my workload, it doesn't have to do with any of that. It's not going to change the way I coach. We just have to stay on top of it. We're staying on top of it. So I think that was a really wise way of handling it, and good for him for staying on top of it. You certainly hope that the everything continues to go well for his health. Obviously, it's been challenges, but so far the his medical team and everything has been on top of it. You've done all you can do, and he's able to still do what he wants to do, and so that's always good for the Buffs. And another thing, when fans are always looking at the idea that oh, well, he's always looking for the next spot, the next jump. This is another one of those ways to look at the way that he parsed it to indicate that not really. His plan is to continue to build what he's building here. And that was a good way of explaining that I'm still in this for the long haul. There's no reason to worry about that otherwise. The challenge is the long haul is where you want to go because the short term situation for the Buffs is now a problem. 2-4, and they are now in a spot where you're facing a lot of good teams. They take on number 22 Iowa State this week, and it's going to be a tough game. It is a relatively close game as far as Vegas goes, -4.5 for the visiting Cyclones, but let's look at this game in particular first before we look at the larger view. But there are two things at play now. At this point, just getting into a bowl game is more likely that they're not going to do it than that they are going to do it. That's just the reality of it. So you look at this game and think, boy, if you're going to either turn it around and get into a bowl, you probably have to find a way to steal this one. I look at it and go, wow, I don't like the way that they've played necessarily after the first quarter of the last few games. But, let me know where you see the Buffs at. The last two games they have lost, but they've had 14-0 leads in both. They haven't been able to close. They haven't even been able to really work through the second half, and bad turnovers, a bunch of mistakes. Coach Prime said specifically this week that we're not as far off as it looks. We have to stop with the self-inflicted wounds. That's obviously true. But when you look at these last couple losses and the Buffaloes where they stand right now, how do you see them looking based on what the plan was? And how do you see it functioning in this game, another national TV game on ESPN against a top-ranked team?
Well, I think they've had pretty good game plans coming into the last two games. Unfortunately, they just haven't been able to sustain. And when you're averaging 7.5 points per game across all your Power 4 games in the second half, unless you blow a team out in the first half, you're not going to win many football games just doing that. Unless you've got, the 15 Broncos defense. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to have an all-time unit to be able to win with that little of offensive production, and that's a problem right now. The inconsistencies are a problem right now. There is some good certainly that's happening, but as you mentioned, they just keep shooting themselves in the foot, and they have been competitive against two very good teams here the last 2 weeks, to the point where you thought they had chances to win both of those games, which heading into it I wouldn't have assured you that was going to be the case. But because of that, I think that they are figuring some things out. It's just been a bit like whack-a-mole, where you fix one thing, here comes something else, and it's like, man, they can't catch a break. And I think the other part of this is sometimes, the old saying is you'd rather be lucky than good, but I think you have to be good to get lucky sometimes. And I just don't think they've gotten to that level where they've earned those breaks from the football gods. That's why you see a punt come down and drill Cam Michael in the back, when you finally get TCU off the field with a chance to go down and take the lead at the end of the game there down in Fort Worth. So there's been some really bad breaks. This weekend is interesting because Iowa State is coming in off a tough loss to Cincinnati. Their defense looked terrible. They're going to be without their starting top two corners for the rest of the year. Those guys are both out. So there's some opportunities for Colorado if they can get another fast start, but they have to find a way to sustain it. This is still a situation where they're doing like 75% of their work. It's the 25% in game, the mental errors, the small mistakes. We talked about this at the beginning of the year. Without Shedeur and without Travis, your margin for error shrinks dramatically. And it's been very evident over the first 6 games of the season that they just don't have the team that can make up for a whole bunch of mistakes. So they have to find a way to play mistake-free football to the best of their ability, at least the closest they can come to that. They don't have to be perfect, but they got to be pretty close to beat some good teams. And especially in this gauntlet stretch that we've spoken about the last couple of weeks, these are 4 teams in BYU, TCU, Iowa State, and Utah that just don't beat themselves. You have to beat them, and Colorado's still trying to learn how to win. It is a totally new group, and without the centerpieces in Shedeur, in Travis, in Cam Silman-Craig, in Shiloh, et cetera, it does feel a little bit more mercenary-esque this year because it's just – the last stop at the OK Corral for 38 guys in their final year of eligibility. So I think there's balancing, finding cohesion and finding leadership, which has probably been one of the biggest disappointments, Sean, is that there just hasn't been great leadership step up this year. A lot of those guys who were in line to play those roles haven't assumed that mantle. And you can tell on the field, they look like a team that lacks leadership with a lot of these mistakes that they make. So, I do expect a competitive game with Iowa State. However, the availability report that just came out yesterday or Wednesday rather for the very first one of the week, it's like the walking wounded. They got a bunch of guys on there that weren't on there last week that not necessarily out, but there's a few key contributors that are doubtful and questionable for this game. So look, it's a war of attrition, a college football season or any football season for that matter, and typically health plays a very, very large component, especially into college football when you're just not as deep. Because with the modern era, you've got ones and threes. The twos normally go somewhere else to be starters in a different location. So that means you're relying on guys a little further down the depth chart that don't have the experience, that don't have the knowledge, and some of that is showing for sure. The irony here is CU's defense, which was such a problem to start the year, I think has actually played better the last 2 weeks. It's the offense that's really struggling.
Yeah, the Sko Show is powered by our friends at Peckish. See them over there in the corner, one of the preferred dining partners of CU Athletics. 2 different locations. Of course, if you're up in Boulder regularly, like our friend Matt is, you're familiar with Peckish up there on the hill. And the new one is on the hill too, just a few steps away. But there's a reason for that because it's 3 times larger than the original one, which gives them more opportunity to get you more of those wings, more of those pizzas, more opportunities to put up more TVs, watch more sports, all of the great stuff that Peckish puts together for you. I was actually at the other Peckish location down in the Denver Tech Center off of basically I-25 and Bellevue. Went and caught the other night the Jeopardy Bar League that they did. Finished second. Thank you for asking. But it turns out to be a lot of fun and a lot of different ways to go out there. Catch a little bit. I wanted to go catch some of the baseball and maybe play a little bit of the trivia and do all that sort of stuff. So you can do all those simultaneously while housing all those sauces. I went and got the liquid lava this time, one of the hottest ones. The one thing I really love about Peckish's sauce, by the way, is that a lot of places when they have hot sauce, it just tastes like hot, right?
Mm.
I mean, we've seen all those sort of things. There's actually has like a lot of flavor to it, a lot of subtleties to the flavor to it. As somebody who really likes hot food, I really like that. And you can get that at both of those locations at Peckish. Check out peckishco.com for more. A couple things I want to go back to, Matt, that you discussed. One would be leadership and the challenge of, as you said, 38 guys in their final year of college football. The mercenary aspect of that is going to be a problem in a transfer portal world because obviously leadership takes more time together till somebody bubbles up, until someone ends up kind of taking those reins. That isn't necessarily you walk in and you're like, wow, you're a leader. We see NFL teams try that all the time when they get a new quarterback. Doesn't always work that way. These things have to happen to a certain extent organically. And that requires people to be there for a little while. So that's part of a problem. But you also talked about the 2 corners being out for Iowa State in this game. I look at that and say, that's good for the Buffs. My problem isn't the corners. My problem is Kaidon Salter failing to see the safety over and over and over again. And some of this, I think, when you've seen these sort of things happen, to me, this very much looks like a situation in which Kaidon Salter, now moving up to the Power 4, guys are faster, guys are bigger, teams are better at disguising. He's not seeing that because he's never seen safeties disguise things quite to the same level and speed that they have at Power 4. And my worry is I don't know if you can fix that in season.
Well, I think it's just about the feel for the game, right? And he hasn't demonstrated that he's got a great feel for it. And certainly there are a lot of questions about, why as a 5th-year guy are you still making some of these mistakes? But it was a question, and one of the biggest ones I raised before the year. He had a major drop-off in 2024 from 2023, and that was a result of, of NIL and the transfer portal and having a 13-1 season his sophomore year and then having big schools come in and pick over the roster. But I had heard behind the scenes that there were some leadership concerns during his time there and that they didn't love every aspect of him. And the hope was being in a system with the best talent that he's ever played with, being under Coach Prime's tutelage, they'd be able to pull that mature guy out of him. It was like pulling teeth with him, and they're still working on it. Coach Prime is extremely frustrated. If they had a different option right now, he would go to it. So I laugh at, Danny Boy, the pipes, they're calling. I'm going to call you out on, the QB questions returning for the Buffs. Did they ever leave? Right? Like, did we ever solve that problem? Maybe against Wyoming, but we were always curious about what it was going to look like. And unfortunately, he hasn't been able to perform up to the level that, first of all, they recruited him to, they expected him to, and honestly probably has come in even below what some of the outside expectations were for him, considering we were all wondering about what it might look like.
Yeah, I mean, it has been for me. Obviously, I mean, I think I didn't expect him to be amazing, but I certainly expected him to be better than he has. And I think some of the points that you're talking about make very real sense. The question now then is, let's now if they win this game against Iowa State, I don't quite frankly care what Caden Salter did unless he had 5 or 6 turnovers. You don't worry about it. You keep going with what worked when you're heading into Utah. But they're heading into Utah next week. That's obviously a tough place to play. And if they were to lose, I love the reaction you had. You're like, tough. That's being
It's
very,
the worst.
yeah,
I got so many bad memories of that
yeah.
stadium.
Being generous probably
Yeah.
on my part there, but the situation there for the Buffs, obviously, let's say that if they win it, great, you keep going, roll with the punches. If they lose it, obviously, I'm not going to even think about making a change and debut as a starter Julian Lewis and throw him in it at Utah. I mean, that's just mean. I mean, why would you do that? Let the senior take that. But wondering about feel for the game, leadership. If Julian Lewis is supposed to be the guy for this program, if they scouted him right, they believe in his talent. To my mind, if this goes south on Saturday, we are looking at that Utah game and saying, all right, lose this. It's probably time for Julian Lewis, even though he's not ready, even though he's going to have to take his lumps, because you know what? He's got to go out there and learn sometime. You got to do it with reps. He's got to go out there and hopefully be the leader of this team. You have to do that with experience. So you might as well get it going, but I don't even think about it for another 2 weeks.
You can't. You can't, because these are two veteran-laden teams. Iowa State was in the Big 12 championship last year. Utah has reloaded. They've got a first-round defensive end and other NFL players on that defense. Kyle Whittingham is a wizard, especially at home there. I think a lot of the Prime fans that came along to CU when he got here don't really get that, because in 2023, CU went out there right after Thanksgiving when Utah was all banged up. It was their third and their fourth stringers. Sure, Staub played, well enough to give them a shot to win in that game, but it was like 3s and 4s against, some 1s and 2s
Right.
in that game. And so this is a Utah team coming up in 2 weeks that present some very unique challenges, and that's a team that you're going to want to keep their offense off the field because they can sustain drives. So you're going to want Kaidon Salter in there, but we'll get there when we get there. To your point, though, Sean, about Julian Lewis specifically, as I brought up, Coach Prime's incredibly frustrated. If he felt like Julian Lewis was ready to assume the mantle, it would be his job right now. And as he responded on Tuesday when asked about Julian Lewis's progress, he said, look, he'll be coming around the mountain when he comes. He's not ready yet. And from things that I've heard behind the scenes, he's showing some signs of that immaturity that we expected when he arrived as a 17-year-old. He's only been 18 for like 2.5 weeks. So I never expected him to be fully polished. But to your point, look, you're 2-6 coming off that Utah game. With the level of frustration mounting, there will be a boiling point that is reached at some point in those next 2 games if they don't find a way to win one of them. And at that point, I think he'll just rip the Band-Aid off come hell or high water. Now, because he played in the Delaware game, Julian, you technically can't preserve the red shirt on him unless you wait and start him against West Virginia, Arizona State, and then Kansas State in the final 3, because you can play 4 and still maintain your year of eligibility.
Yeah.
I think at this point, we're getting pretty close to that not mattering and them just ripping it off, and then hoping at some point in the next couple of years while Julian's in school, the powers at B come together and institute a 5th year of eligibility for all athletes. I think we're assuming that that's got a pretty good likelihood to be a reality here in the next couple of years. However, we'll see what Coach Prime wants to do and what Julian and his family want to do. And look, I don't know how this is all going to play out, but I do know that they can't, to your point, make a change the next 2 weeks, because it does not give them the best chance to win.
Right.
And the other part of this is that despite all the fans, DMing and getting in my mentions and telling me, well, he threw 3 interceptions, Salter did, against TCU. Can't get much worse. Yes, it can.
Sure it can.
They can get their doors blown off.
He did have 3 total touchdowns too. He ran for 1 and
Yeah.
threw for 2 more. It can absolutely get worse. At least his touchdown to interception was 1-1. It can absolutely get worse. And that's I think that's a good point too, because everyone wants to kind of tear the Band-Aid off. And I do think the point you're making is a really good one, Matt. The idea that when you look at Julian Lewis, if he is not ready, and I'm not shocked that he's not ready, and if it's only 1 extra game, Arizona, I don't know. Do you throw Ryan Staub in for one game? At that point, you'd be 2-6. You're
Right.
not. You don't go. You don't win 2 of your first 8 and then rip off 4 wins in a row. So you're not going to a bowl. So at that point, what does it matter? Lewis's potential red shirt would be more valuable than a win over Arizona. So do you throw Staub in with one more? Do you just say we're not even going to worry about it? We'll start Salter for one extra one. Who cares? That's a tough call, but I could see it being the case as long as Julian Lewis's family and he's okay with it, and the situation's okay with doing that, because you still get to start those last 3 games as opposed to 4 games, and presumably the keys to the car are still yours in the next season, presuming you beat Ryan Staub out for the job. And the other part we've talked about is at the beginning of next year in the spring, it's perfectly okay for Deion Sanders to look at Ryan Staub and Julian Lewis, despite Lewis's pedigree, and say, it's an open competition. The best player gets it. And presumably you hope that the guy who was recruited as the best high school quarterback in the country gets it, but you also don't want to just hand it to him. And that's perfectly okay. You want him to go get it. So I could see that as being a defensible position. It is hard for the fan base, though, to keep taking losses when you want to see the next guy. But this is where we started the program. Deion Sanders has multiple objectives he's trying to accomplish at the same time. There's trying to navigate this year, and then there's trying to set up next offseason, next transfer portal, next season, and the seasons to come. And trying to do all those things simultaneously when your team is winning isn't too bad. And we can look again. I've mentioned that the plan for Julian Lewis was kind of the Arch Manning plan in Texas a year ago, right? When fans are going, why in the world are you sitting behind Quinn Ewers? And then this year he starts, and you're like, oh, that's why.
Right.
And you don't want that to necessarily happen in this case. So rushing Julian Lewis may not be the answer, but you have to manage the expectations, not only with the fan base, but also with the player himself. And this is a lot of behind the scenes stuff that it is hard for people to understand when they're just a fan. And I don't mean that in a derisive term. I mean, when you don't have the experience to see how all this works. You brought up being a neurosurgeon before. Look, I don't look at someone talks to me one of these days and says, hey, we need to do a little bit of brain surgery. I'm going, well, I respect that. But when I've observed other people have brain surgery, I just don't think we need that. Look, I'd be talking out my ass, right? I shouldn't be saying that. Like, don't say that kind of stuff. Expertise matters. I see that look on your face. But yeah, expertise matters. And to an extent, being able to see this, that's kind of why it's fun to do this show, to try to let people know there are more things going on behind the scenes than you're able to see from the outside. That is not unusual, but these challenges, in certain extents, are.
Yeah, and you get a lot of people that say, well, look at Bryce Underwood and look at these freshmen around the country who are getting the start. Yeah, those guys are all a year older than Julian.
Right.
Julian's supposed to be a first semester senior in high school right now. It was never supposed to click for him. But I do understand from a fan's perspective, wanting to see the shiny new toy. The other thing I kind of roll my eyes at is like, I mean, are CU fans so accustomed to winning now that they can't wait just another week? Like there's it's funny. They've become a victim of their own success to a degree, for sure, because there's unrealistic expectations that have been set. And Coach Prime didn't help matters by continually saying that he had a better team when what he really meant is we probably have more lower end quality depth.
Yes.
That's what he probably meant. And he tried to say the talent is more spread out, but he put it the wrong way. And because of that, he set expectation way too high. And a lot of people are really upset right now. And it's, this is where I come back to, you have to have multiple perspectives of where CU was before he got here and where they are now and what they hope to be. And the truth is there is no quick and easy fix to this situation.
Yeah. Can I for 1 minute, Matt? I just want to share for some depth here. I get it that Prime has revitalized CU's reputation, the excitement, the juice, whatever you want to call it, around college football. His record as the Buffs coach is 15-16. So when you talk about, geez, the fans gotten so used to winning. No, he still has a losing record since he's come into the program. And again, that's not that weird. Before he came in, it was a one win program, and it was a 1-win program that didn't have a tremendous amount of success for amount of time before that, except for a couple blips with Mike McIntyre. And so I get it. The excitement for the Buffs is there, but at the moment, it has been, Travis Hunter notwithstanding, more sizzle than steak. And again, that's what I'd expect right now. And I'm okay with this team getting more depth as you start to build depth for future years. I'm okay with that. I understand that's part of the process. But yeah, for Buffs fans to look at it and say, oh yeah, well, we're used to being a great team. You haven't been a great team yet. You're still a sub 500 program under Deion Sanders. I don't think it's going to stay that way for much longer. But let's not act like they were right in the mix for the college football playoff at any point.
Yeah, I mean, you win one more game last year, you're in the Big 12 title, and that changes things, right? You still had a great season.
But we saw what happened in that bowl game.
Oh, of course.
They got absolutely exposed, and they probably would have in that game too.
Yeah, I just don't want to minimize the accomplishment of winning 9 at Colorado.
I don't. But it's not as if there's this long track record here of overwhelming success.
Not that the fan base should be used to, at least, and that's where you're spot on in all of this. And it's something that makes me laugh all the time, because I always hear people are like, well, they're a young team and they're growing. They're not a young team. They've got 38 guys in their final year of eligibility. A lot of these mistakes that they're making are emblematic of a young team, but that's not the case. So when we think about the future and what it looks like to replace those guys and to build a team that's going to be halfway decent, the task ahead of them next offseason, I've thought about it since the beginning of the year. It's just ridiculous. But the other part of this here is that the reasonable expectation for fans, despite the mercenary nature of how they've built everything and had to build everything in order to have a chance to be competitive, you expect now I just got to make sure I'm not doing it the wrong way, because it may be the right way for me. You expect the trajectory in year 3 to be going up. You know what I'm saying? Like, It's not right now. And that's where people are going, oh boy, what's happening here? But it's a completely different group. It's a 1-year process. It's not your father's college football. It's not how it works anymore. And so while I think there's a lot of complications to it, they have to change how they evaluate moving forward. And I think a prime example is Kaidon Salter, because they got it wrong with Kaidon Salter. Nobody's going to admit that in the program right now, at least publicly. Behind closed doors, they are. And behind closed doors, they know that they have to change the way that they evaluate transfers based upon this. So as you talked about Juju and Ryan Staub potentially competing for that QB1 spot next year, make sure you throw in player X, because player X will be a part of the equation. They will go get another quarterback and really do their due diligence to make sure he's the right guy. Because to your point, if Juju's not ready, Coach Prime's not handing him the keys. Otherwise, he'd be in there right now.
Yeah, and that, I think, it's an off-season discussion, but I know you and I have hit on that before. One of the things the Buffs have to do is they do have to revisit the way they have recruited in the transfer portal, because I wouldn't say it's a complete whiff on Kaidon Salter. He is starting for you, but at the same time, it isn't what they expected. And he's not the only one out of the transfers. Let's be honest about that. He's the quarterback, so he takes the most heat. He takes the most flack. I'm not sure he's even among the bottom 5 most disappointing transfers, to be totally honest. So, I mean, that is that on the players to a certain extent? It is. But when you start seeing it be across the board, where the guys aren't hitting their expectations from the transfer portal almost across the board, that's something that's an internal issue that has to be addressed. But that's an off-season thing. The Buffs will have a chance to see if they can turn this around and get the losing streak over with. They have been in the last couple games. They will try to get this win against Iowa State and then keep their bowl hopes alive. We'll find out a little bit more about it coming out on Saturday. But Matt, I really appreciate you joining us. I want to give you a moment too. I mentioned at the beginning of the show. Tell people about your podcast too as well, please.
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube at Real Matt Smith, Matt with 1 T. Got some stuff. I actually just had a great episode with Mark Johnson yesterday, voice of the Buffs. Always enjoy talking to Mark.
Your Colorado Buffalo. Yeah.
He's the only guy that makes me. Yeah, he's the only guy that makes me feel insecure about my own voice. To be him and Alan Roach, those are the 2 gentlemen.
That's not bad company.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hello, Mark. That's how it sounds in comparison to those guys.
For me too. I guess.
Yeah, I know. And so outside of that, you can find me on Brian Howell's channel. We do a podcast every single week. We got one done this week. And you brought up the juice, the hype. They got to win for that juice and the hype to stay there. So don't think that from an outside national perspective, the buzz is still where it was. They have to build back up there, and certainly we're seeing that across the board. Everybody is. Even Bucky, Deion Sanders Jr., is tongue-in-cheek said it quite a few times on Well Off Media. It's hard out here for CU content creators right now.
Yeah, it is interesting because this game will be on ESPN, but the rest of their kickoffs are all TBD, which also means national broadcast TBD. And that means, it depends. You don't go out there and get a win. Hey, the viewing audience is fickle across the country. You may not be as interesting. So it is a big opportunity for the Buffaloes to go ahead and get a win. If they do so, you beat a top 25 team, and you're probably kicking that can down the road for a couple of weeks with the energy surrounding the program. It's very valuable. So we'll find out what they do. Matt Smith, appreciate you joining us so much. Thanks for every time you've come on this year. Really looking forward to talking more about the Buffs with you at some point later this season.
Absolutely, buddy. Happy to do it.
Thanks so much. For all of us here at Mile High Sports, I want to thank our friends at Peckish, as we pointed out, 2 different locations. Not only the one in the Hill, still on the Hill, just a couple steps away, 3 times the size, all of the same wings and pizza that you love, all of the sauces, and a great place to catch the game if you can't be at Folsom Field. There are worse places you can go to Peckish because, as I pointed out before, wings, pizza, and beer go pretty nicely with football in most cases. So you can get that at either of the Peckish locations up in the Hill or down in the DTC. If you haven't had a chance to try it, obviously it's terrific place to be. The food is good. Everything's good. They do such a great job with so many different things over there at Peckish. It's why it's a preferred partner of CU Athletics. We know that Coach Prime's eating there. We know that Travis Hunter ate there. We know that Deion Sanders ate there. You can tell because there's pictures of them, eating there on the walls. So it's obviously a spot where you want to go. If you want some wings, you want some pizza, you want to watch some football, you should visit Peckish, peckishco.com for more. For Matt Smith, for Danny Bailey, our producer, I'm Sean Drotar. Thanks for watching the Sko Show on Mile High Sports. We'll be back at you next week. But as always, I want to finish the game with, boy, this week more than others. 1, Brandy, you're a fine girl. And 2, Sko Buffs.